In front of 52 people, with the clink of glasses echoing under the twilight sky and the smoke of barbecue heavy in the air, my mother rose to her feet. She lifted her glass of white wine, her gaze fixed on my younger sister, and a smile, radiant, almost blinding, spread across her face. "This is the daughter who has always loved her family," she declared. A ripple of admiration passed through the crowd, but before anyone could respond, she turned to me. Her expression didn't harden, her tone didn't rise. It was worse than that. Just a faint smile, polite, detached, like she was speaking to a stranger. "And that one?" she said, her words slicing deeper than any shout could. "She's never done a thing to help." The backyard went silent. No nervous laughter, no correction, no one daring to break the tension, only the sound of ice in glasses and the loud, uneven beat of my own heart as I tried to keep my hands from shaking. Welcome to Family Ashes, a place where secrets aren't whispered but burned alive in front of everyone, where the people you sacrifice for are the first to set you on fire. And I ask you this. If you discovered your own family had been erasing you quietly year after year, pretending your sacrifices never existed, what would you do? Would you smile, keep the peace, and swallow the ash? Or would you finally stand, walk away, and never return? Leave a comment if you've ever felt invisible in your own home. Like this video if these words feel too close to your bones. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, because here, we tell the stories no one dares to speak, the ones people still call family. My name is Natalie Harris. I'm 36 and I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Denver, Colorado. The place isn't big, but the walls are thick enough to hold my secrets, and the silence is heavy enough to remind me of everything I carry that no one else sees. By day, I work as an auditor for a mid-sized financial firm. It's not glamorous, not the kind of job that makes magazine covers, but it pays. Enough to live, enough to save, enough to support an entire family that I no longer live with. For 9 years, I've been the invisible backbone. I've covered everything. The mortgage on my parents' aging home in Aurora, the utilities, the medical bills when my father slipped in the backyard, even tuition for my sister Sophie, who decided, after a failed yoga certification, to reinvent herself with artisanal candles. No one asked where the money came from. No one refused it. They just accepted. And I kept sending it, month after month, as if it were normal, as if my role in this family was to give until I disappeared. Sophie is 4 years younger, with blonde waves and a soft, airy voice that people say has healing energy. She's tried it all: yoga, acting, abstract art, each venture abandoned as quickly as it began, until she moved back in with my parents to find herself again. This time it was candles in the garage. I don't hate her, not really, but I used to believe that everyone in the family was doing their part. I used to believe effort mattered. Then I learned some roles are easier to love, and some people, like me, are remembered not for what they gave, but for what they failed to perform, like not being in a photo collage. This year, the family reunion was at a lodge tucked by Bear Lake, Utah, a place they'd used before, for weddings and forced smile reunions. Nearly 50 relatives came, migrating like birds. Some drove from Nevada, some brought tents, dogs, even box fans. Adults busied themselves with food. Kids darted across the yard, kicking soda cans. Country music thundered from a Bluetooth speaker. Long tables stretched with checkered tablecloths. Potato salad bowls no one touched twice. I was late. Not because of traffic, not because I forgot. I sat in my car for 15 minutes, staring at the crudely painted wooden sign, "Welcome Harris Family." My name was on it, generic, invisible. Not Natalie, just another Harris. And for a moment, I let myself wonder. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe this time they would look at me and see more than a walking wallet. In my hands, I held an envelope. Inside, a gift card to Le Jardin, the French restaurant in downtown Denver, a place my parents had always sighed about when we drove past. Someday we'll go there. I thought maybe this could be that someday. Maybe this gift would remind them I was part of this family too. They never booked a reservation. Sometimes it was too expensive. Sometimes it was Sophie's schedule. I'd made the reservation 3 weeks ahead, asked for the table by the window that looked out over the grape arbor, and requested a tiny vase of lavender be waiting on the table. The gift wasn't flashy, just enough to feel like a real offering, and I told myself, maybe this time they'll see it. Maybe this time they'll see me. Across the lawn, I saw Sophie first. White dress, hair loose, the kind of smile that arrives fully formed and makes the world look effortless. She carried a present wrapped in gold tissue with a satin ribbon. It was the familiar choreography. Sophie always brought something, always knew the moment to laugh loudest, hug longest, to make everything look as if it had always been meant to be this way. Quiet as a habit, I slid my envelope under my parents' dinner plate. No announcement, no speech, just another invisible act in a decade of invisible giving. Dinner unfolded into slow Southern comfort. Barbecue, grilled corn, baked beans, the bland, sweet bread I'd always pretended to like. Laughter braided with the clink of cutlery and uncles sharing the same old stories. For a heartbeat, I let myself believe I'd been wrong, that maybe this evening would be different. Then Sophie stood. Someone handed her a microphone like handing over a script she'd been rehearsing in private. She smiled with that practiced softness. "I wasn't planning to say anything," she began, voice calm and rehearsed. "But I have a small gift for our parents." She peeled back the paper and held up a photo collage. Carefully curated images of birthdays on the beach, Christmas mornings, candid balcony shots. My parents and Sophie, framed in perfect smiling memory. I searched for myself in the photos. Not there. Not at the center, not tucked in the corner. Not even cropped in. Simply absent, as if my years of presence had been edited out. My mother took the frame like a relic. Her eyes lingered on the pictures, then she rose and raised her glass to chest height. Her voice was steady, full of feeling. "This is the daughter who's always loved her family," she announced. Applause, a few awes. I felt my fingers clench under the table. Then she looked at me, not loud, not cruel, only composed and repeated as if stating a fact. "And that one, she's never done a thing to help." After that, the world narrowed. Someone dropped a fork. Someone cleared their throat. But no one asked what she meant. No one asked why I wasn't in the photos. No one reached for me. I stood up like a ghost rising from an empty seat. No dramatic slam, no thrown glass, nothing for the movies. Just a quiet exit, the kind that lets the rest of the room breathe easy and return to their comfortable script. My chair scraped softly. A couple of heads turned, then went back to their plates. No hand reached out. No one called my name. It was as though they'd been waiting. For the moment I would walk away. For the moment the family could pretend everything was still ordered and simple without me in it. I moved between rows of folding tables and cooling platters, past the laughter of relatives who couldn't remember my middle name, past Sophie with her head bowed in mock modesty, her hand resting lightly on Mom's shoulder as if that touch could seal the story. I kept my eyes down, not out of anger, but to avoid seeing myself reflected back as unnecessary. I was too tired to act surprised at being erased. My car was parked at the tree line beneath a band of dried chestnut trees. I opened the driver's door and sat, engine off, hands curled on the wheel. The string lights still winked across the lawn, a constellation I'd never been part of. I sat 5 minutes, then 10, feeling neither the sting of tears nor the need to call anyone. I only let the silence sink in, teaching my body a new rule. From this point forward, we do not return. The drive back to Denver was soundless. I didn't want music, didn't want a voice to fill the space I was trying to feel. I drove with the windows up, the night air pressing against the glass, thinking about all the times I'd covered bills and bandaged wounds and smoothed over embarrassments so the family's picture stayed neat. The lavender in the vase I'd requested at the restaurant felt suddenly absurd, something delicate set to wither in a frame that had already been decided. When I pulled into my apartment, I didn't rush inside. I sat in the car a little longer, breathing slow, letting the decision I'd made at the table settle in my bones. No more quiet payments, no more invisible errands, no more pretending their version of family included me. Tonight had shown me the truth. They'd been editing me out for years. The only question that remained was what I would do with that knowledge. I let the engine hum and kept the world muted, and in that hush, the ledger in my head began to unspool, each line a silent accusation. $980 a month for the mortgage, from the year my dad lost his job in 2014 until he scraped together part-time hours at the town library. $120 whenever Sophie needed a quick loan for another candle class or restarting her Etsy supplies. $3. 000 for my mom's outpatient procedure when she'd let the insurance lapse. $160 a month for the gas card under my name so they could fill 3 tanks a week. There were months I covered the roof after a storm. Months I paid the car insurance. Months I wired money in 10 minutes flat because Sophie was panicking about unpaid tuition. When I finally added the small things and the large things, the transfers I'd never tracked, the emergency wires, the quiet reimbursements, the total stared back at me. More than $148,000. All of it invisible. Not one official thank you. No card. No, you kept this family from falling apart. Just a mission and a frame without me in it. Back at my apartment, I didn't flip the lights on. I slid out of my shoes, went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and let my hand rest on the granite like it might steady me against some quick collapse. I expected anger, shame, a hot ache of betrayal. Instead, there was a flat, sharp finality, like someone had pulled the plug and everything that ran through me shut down. I felt done. I opened my laptop not to compose a speech but to close accounts. One by one, I logged in and severed the lifelines, stopped the automatic mortgage transfer, canceled the secondary credit card Mom used to book her yearly escape, shut down the utility account in my name, revoked the gas card, closed the shared shopping account Sophie used during sales, changed the password on the email they'd borrowed forever ago. Clean cuts, no theatrics, no threats, just decisive, irreversible moves. I didn't do it to punish. I did it because being erased from their story made it pointless to keep funding a role I had never been allowed to occupy. I'd never wanted praise or parades. I only wanted acknowledgement, proof that what I did mattered. Instead, they'd chosen a picture without me. That was the only betrayal I could not forget. That night I showered for longer than necessary. Not from exhaustion, but because for the first time in 9 years, I didn't check my phone to see if a payment had cleared. I set my alarm 2 hours later, and when I slept, it was the kind of sleep that has no interruptions. No replaying of missed calls, no sudden jolts awake to check a balance. I slept like a person who had stopped being an ATM and was allowed to be simply a person again. The next morning, the doorbell rang. One long, deliberate chime, like someone confident the answer would be there. I didn't rush. I watched them through the tiny curtain window by the microwave. My mom, wrapped in that light beige cardigan she wore when she wanted to look fragile and forgiven, and my dad a half step behind, hands buried in his pockets, shoulders slack. From inside my kitchen, they looked like strangers asking permission to cross a threshold that used to be mine. I didn't chain the lock. I didn't switch on the porch light. We stood locked in a silent standoff. Me inside the doorway, them exposed in the burning sunlight. The air between us was heavy, brittle, like the second before glass shatters. "Can we talk for a moment?" my mother finally said, her voice low, stripped of its usual confidence. There was no smile, no warmth, only a trace of fear, like she half expected me to slam the door in her face. "I just want to clear up a misunderstanding." I leaned against the frame, arms crossed, my eyes never leaving hers. "We'll talk here," I replied, sharp but controlled. I didn't step aside. This threshold was mine, the single space they hadn't infected with demands, 2 a.m. calls and emails screaming urgent. Here, I drew the line. And they knew exactly why, because the night my mother raised her glass and erased me with a single sentence, she cut herself out of this room forever. She shifted uneasily, glancing around like a cornered animal searching for an exit. "About what happened at the reunion," she whispered. "I didn't mean it like that." Everyone was watching. Sophie had just given us the photo. I got emotional. Her words dissolved into air. "I just misspoke." "Misspoke," I repeated, my voice flat, dissecting the word like a surgeon cutting into rot. In front of 52 people. For the first time, my father stepped forward. "We didn't think you'd react this way," he muttered. I turned to him, each word sharp as glass. "React how?" "Stay silent while I kept the lights on. Keep paying every bill so no one else had to. As long as the money flowed, I was useful. But the second a family photo was raised, I didn't even exist." Silence. Not even a defense. I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the Notes app, the one I filled that night at 2 a.m. when I came back broken from the reunion. My thumb hovered. Then I read it aloud. Each number a verdict. $83,400 for the mortgage, $21,600 for utilities, $11,100 for medical bills, including Dad's hypertension stays, $5, $700 for Sophie's candle classes, workshops, business course, $3,900 for cars, gas, insurance, over $20,000 more I can't even track anymore. Total, $148,000 in 9 years. Every syllable landed like a hammer. My mother's gaze fell to the concrete. My father flinched, eyes darting anywhere but mine. They remembered. They had to. The whispered favors, the desperate midnight texts. And my answer had always been yes. And after all of that, I pressed on, my voice steady as a blade, you stood up, raised your glass, and declared I'd never helped. Not one person objected. Not one turned to me in disbelief. Which means they all believed it. I didn't need their excuses. I didn't want to hear about being caught up in the moment or that Sophie was fragile. The truth was simpler. They erased me because it was easy. Because to them, I was never meant to be part of the story. "No one owes me understanding," I said finally, quiet but unshakable. But they had a choice, and they chose applause over truth. If everything I've given doesn't make me family, then this is the last day I'll pay to pretend. I closed the door slowly, not slamming, not cruel, just final. Sunlight bled through the curtains, but inside me it dimmed, colder than it had ever been. I was wiping the kitchen counter when the bell rang again. 2 sharp notes, quick, insistent, not impatient but entitled, like a knock on property they still believed was theirs. I didn't rush. From the side window, I saw her. Sophie, tote bag digging into her shoulder, sandals slipping, hair shoved into a messy bun. Same careless confidence, same practiced resilience, as if disaster was just raw material for her next healing journey. I opened the door without a word. She walked past me anyway, uninvited, like she was stepping into a place that had always belonged to her. But this time, she was wrong. It wasn't the bedroom where Sophie once stole my lipstick like it was hers. It wasn't the kitchen where I brewed tea for her trembling hands during her anxiety spells. This was different. This was my fortress, built brick by brick from my paychecks, my overtime, my exhaustion. And now I stood rooted at its center, refusing to step back, refusing to yield. "Do you even realize what you've done?" Sophie burst out the moment she crossed the threshold. No greeting, no pretense, just raw accusation, her voice pitched high, like someone shoved off a train they assumed would carry them forever. "You've vanished." No texts, no calls. Mom and Dad blew up my phone 14 times this morning. At first they thought you were sulking, but then the money stopped. Cards declined, accounts frozen. They're spiraling. I didn't flinch. I'd heard this tone before, crisis handed to me like a baton, always with the same question buried beneath it. "Why haven't you fixed this yet?" "I had to pick up another shift yesterday," she went on, her words jagged. "Mom and Dad said I'm supposed to start helping now." She spit it out like betrayal, as if the expectation she might finally earn something herself was an insult. "You know they've relied on you for years, and now you just cut it off. What even is this?" I lowered myself into the chair, arms crossed tight, gaze steady. "It's what they chose, Sophie," I said slowly, every syllable deliberate. "In front of 52 witnesses, Mom raised her glass, beamed at you like you were the family's savior, and declared I'd never once helped. No one contradicted her, not even you. She shook her head fast, as though she could outrun the truth. I was shocked. I didn't think Mom would. But you didn't correct her, I sliced in. You lowered your eyes, smiled, let the applause wash over you. You wore the lie like it fit while I sat invisible at that table. You let me walk out without a word, without asking why the air stalled. Sophie turned slightly, face tightening. Not remorse. Maybe just calculating her defense. It's not that simple, she murmured. You know how Mom is. She blurts things out. She gets swept up, I nodded once. And you? You get swept up in the applause. You fit neatly into the role of perfect daughter, the face in the photo frame, the name that makes relatives nod like you're a blessing. Her voice cracked into a whisper. I didn't ask for that. But you didn't refuse it, I shot back. You stood there, basking in what wasn't yours. And when I disappeared, you didn't chase me. You only came when the safety net frayed, when the system I kept alive finally went dark. That's when you remembered me. Her eyes glossed, tears threatening. But I didn't bend. For once, I wasn't silencing myself to keep peace. You're angry I left Mom and Dad hanging, I said, my voice steady as iron. But really, I'm just living the truth they toasted to, that I never helped. So now they get to live without my invisible hand. And you, Sophie, you finally get the chance to prove you're everything they praised you for. She said nothing. A tear traced her cheek, left unwiped. For the first time, she seemed to feel the weight of the crown she'd accepted. Without a word, she turned, walked to the door, no slam, no plea, just gone, stepping into a reality where bills would no longer vanish by magic. I remained in the center of my space, not triumphant, not broken, just still, the kind of stillness that comes when you've stopped being the scaffolding for a collapsing house. Either they'd learn to stand, or they'd fall. I expected silence after that rupture. I thought they'd retreat, spin stories for neighbors, bury their shame where I could never reach it. But one Wednesday morning, while I was sliding receipts into their folders, a notification blinked across my screen from the Harris Family Forever Facebook group. Before reason could stop me, my finger tapped it open. There it was, a crisp, glowing photo. Mom smiling. Dad beside her, Sophie front and center, all of them beaming by the lakeside lodge like they'd just returned from the perfect vacation. They stood in a neat row, my parents, Sophie, aunts, uncles, cousins, smiling like a postcard. And me? I was not there. Not a gap to imagine me into, not a sliver of shadow where I could have once belonged. The frame was flawless without me, the same way the thank you speech that night had been. Neat, rehearsed, and perfectly edited. The caption dripped my mother's usual sentimental tone, just sweet enough to warm anyone who didn't know the truth. Family is everything, even when someone forgets that. I wasn't surprised. Surprise would have hurt less. Instead, there was a cold cut, clean, precise, like scissors through a quilt you once believed whole. Comments unfurled beneath the photo like sympathy already prepared. An aunt wrote, "You're right, family is where it begins and ends." A distant cousin dropped a heart emoji. "Every family has someone who drifts," another wrote, "but love waits for them to come home." I read every line not to find my name, but to prove to myself they would never speak the truth. They chose the easy story. Pretend I never existed. I didn't lash out. I didn't fling accusations into the thread. Instead, I did what I always did best, compile the ledger of my life. I pulled up 9 years of receipts, email confirmations, bank statements, screenshots of wire transfers, thank you notes from clinics, utility bills, electric, water, gas, texts from Sophie begging when her account went negative, tuition receipts, last-minute flights. Each document alone was mundane. Strung together, they told a story of invisible work and unpaid devotion. I assembled them into a single post, no flourish, no snarky caption, just the receipts, each image a quiet proof. At the bottom, I typed one line. Total expenses over 9 years, $148,330. No expectations, no demands, no regrets, but also no more. I said it public, didn't tag them, didn't name names. They all knew who it was about. I didn't need to point. I hit post at 10 a.m., shut the laptop at 10:45, and went about small, ordinary chores, made lunch, scrubbed the tub, watered the plants, the mundane opposite of 9 years of invisible scaffolding. By afternoon, the post had begun to move. Not because I pushed it, but because the people who'd sat quiet while my mother erased me began to notice. "I had no idea you did all that," someone messaged. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything that night," another wrote. A cousin sent a crying emoji. One person posted a Bible verse about forgiveness. My mother's photo stayed up, untouched, as if I'd vanished for no reason. She made no public correction, no deleted post scramble, just silence like a stone. Then Sophie texted, 3 words, spare and clinical. "We need to talk." I stared at them longer than necessary, not because I intended to answer, but because those 3 words were finally driven by need, not comfort. For the first time, she wasn't reaching out for love. She was reaching because the center had fallen and everything else was starting to wobble. I thought that would be the end. I thought maybe they would drift away into private apologies and neighborly explanations and leave me to my new quiet. Instead, weeks later on a gray afternoon, I saw them at my door. No fanfare, no dramatic entry. 3 silhouettes on my porch like survivors coming back into a house that had gone cold. Through the kitchen window, I watched my mother stand in the middle, smaller somehow, her hair unkempt, the soft beige cardigan, once her armor, now limp and tired. My father was a half step behind her, hands in his pockets, old sneakers stained at the toe, shoulders rounded like someone carrying an ache he'd been ignoring. They looked less like the confident faces in a family portrait, and more like people who'd finally realized a foundation had been quietly removed from beneath them. It wasn't the bedroom where Sophie used to borrow my lipstick. It wasn't the kitchen where I brewed tea when she couldn't breathe. This was my space, paid for with overtime, skipped lunches, exhausted weekends, and I planted myself in the center of it, refusing to move. "Do you even know what you're doing?" Sophie demanded the moment she crossed the threshold, voice sharper than I expected. No texts, no answers. Mom and Dad called me 14 times this morning. The payments didn't go through. Cards declined, accounts locked. They think something happened to you. They're panicking. She spoke as if panic were my fault, as if my refusal to be their failsafe had betrayed some unspoken contract. I sat, arms folded, beat for beat with her. "They chose it, Sophie," I said slowly, in front of 52 people. Mom raised her glass and announced I'd never helped. "You didn't correct her." "No one did?" She stammered that she was surprised, that she hadn't expected her to say it. I didn't let her off the hook. "You didn't contradict her. You accepted that applause. You watched me leave and never asked why." The words landed without flourish, just fact. Her face softened, then tightened. She muttered that life isn't black and white, that Mom gets swept up in moments. I told her she'd been swept up into a role, the beloved daughter in the frame, the one relatives praised. She whispered, "I didn't ask for that." I answered bluntly, "You didn't refuse it either." Tears came, slow and real this time, but I didn't bend. For once, I wasn't the one swallowing discomfort for the sake of peace. "You're mad I left them to scramble," I said, voice steady. "But I'm only mirroring what they declared, that I'd never helped. Now they can learn how to manage without me." She walked out without dramatics, no slammed door, only the quiet of someone stepping into responsibility for the first time. Weeks later, a cousin sent a photo. A "for sale" sign planted in the yard of the house I'd kept afloat. They'd sold it under market to move fast, downsized to a shabby rental on the outskirts, thin walls, humming fluorescents in the hall. I didn't go. I only saw my mother in another cousin's snapshot, bent over a potted plant on the new stoop, watering dry soil in small, reluctant pores. Sophie set up a tiny studio, worked shifts at a cafe, posted fewer stories, no more healing captions, only short updates about candle restocks and small sales. I didn't unfollow her, I simply let her life scroll by without comment. And me? I kept living. No neat reconciliation scene, no TV-ready reunion. I existed without explaining myself, without justifying absence, free of the quiet labor I'd long performed. I'm not furious anymore. I'm not with them. I'm telling this not for pity, but so someone else might hear themselves. The quiet suffering. The role that never ends because we mistake endurance for belonging. I stepped out once and left nothing behind. I had once thought silence would be the least painful ending, but silence can erase a person. When you stop speaking, people forget you have a voice, forget you are a daughter, a sister, a person inside their story. I used to be in that picture somewhere. One day, I realized I'd been erased and nobody even picked up the eraser. And the thing that stung the most wasn't the sentence my mother said in front of 52 people. It was that nobody in that room looked surprised. That quiet acceptance, like omission was a fact, was the real wound. It wasn't my mother's sentence in front of 52 people that cut the deepest. What truly chilled me was the silence that followed. No one flinched, no one turned to me, no one said, "That's not true, she's always been here." Their stillness declared my absence as natural, my sacrifices as disposable. I used to carry it all, whispering to myself, if I don't do it, who will? I once convinced myself this was family's design. Some people sacrifice, some people are loved. But then I learned, if your place in a family is only secured when you're paying, when you're holding everything up, when you're dimming your light so others can shine, then that isn't love. It's exploitation, and there is no birth certificate sacred enough to turn exploitation into affection. Some grow up believing family is forever, that no matter how wrong you are, how tired you get, someone will always open the door and say, "Welcome home." But people like me learn otherwise, through nights when no one checks in, through bills printed and paid in silence, through photo sessions we fund but never appear in. Family is not always a place you return to. Sometimes it's the very place you must leave to save yourself. Real love doesn't come with conditions. It isn't a paycheck. It isn't a monthly wire transfer. It isn't being the reliable one, the understanding one. Real love means being allowed to exist without proving your worth, being acknowledged without having to keep the roof from caving in alone. And if a bond only survives because you're paying to hold your spot, then maybe it never existed at all. I don't need their apologies. I don't need them to take the post down, rewrite the speech, or reframe the past. I don't need anything from them, because for the first time in my life, I finally have something I once thought was a luxury. Silence. The kind that comes when you owe nothing to anyone anymore. From the family I once fought to hold together, I don't tell this story to be pitied. I tell it so that if you, somewhere, are trapped in a role you never chose, living like a shadow beneath someone else's spotlight, giving parts of yourself every month to keep a house from collapsing while no one even remembers your name, you'll understand you're not crazy, not oversensitive, not ungrateful. You're simply someone who has endured enough. Share this story if you've ever been the one silently carrying the entire family. You don't need to explain. Just tell it so someone else might see themselves inside it. And if you never have, pause for a moment and ask yourself, is there someone in your life doing that for you right now? Quietly, without complaint, without demand, without drawing attention, just keeping everything from falling apart?